Canada's north, specifically the territories of Nunavut and the Northwest Territories, are one of the largest mining areas in the world. The first mine actually went up in the area in the early 1930s, and since then mining has been the economic backbone of the Northwest Territories and Nunavut, providing employment and business opportunities as well as contributing to the infrastructure in each of these territories. But did you know Nunavut was once home to the northernmost mine in the entire world, and possibly one of the most isolated in the entire world? In the northern regions of Nunavut, on Little Cornwallis Island, existed the Polaris Mine. And as always, this is Ali and welcome back to Urban Atlas. Now, the Polaris Mine, like I previously mentioned, was located on Little Cornwallis Island. And when opened in 1981, this area was actually part of the Northwest Territories. However, today Little Cornwallis Island is part of Nunavut's jurisdiction. Now, this mine was extremely isolated. It's located in an extremely northern location, approximately 1,120 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle. The closest community was the Inuit hamlet of Resolute, which is located approximately 100 kilometers or 60 miles south of the Polaris Mine. And Resolute itself is a very small and isolated community, with a population of approximately 180 residents. Just imagine what life would have been like on the Polaris Mine, living and working in one of the most inhospitable and remote regions in the entire world. Now, I apologize for the poor resolution in the photos. Because the Polaris Mine was closed several decades ago, it's really hard to find good quality satellite photos or even photos of the actual mine that are free to use. So we'll have to make do with some low resolution photos. Polaris was a place where you'd often face temperatures of negative 50 degrees Celsius, as well as periods with several months without sunlight. Now, the remote mine specialized in the extraction of both zinc and lead. The metals were discovered back in 1960. Reserves were thought to be approximately 25 million tons of 14% zinc and 4% lead. Mining at Polaris commenced in 1981 and continued on for 21 years. Now, the most challenging part about mining in this area would probably not be the conditions, but the logistics of the mine. Located thousands of kilometers away from the nearest major city, the transportation of the key components of the mine would have been an extremely challenging endeavor. In fact, the mill, maintenance facilities, warehouse, and offices were constructed on a double-hulled barge in Trois-Rivières, Quebec, located approximately 3,500 kilometers from Polaris. And it was then transported to the Polaris Mine during the short ice-free period in the summer of 1981. And thus, the barge traveled over 5,600 kilometers from Trois-Rivières, Quebec to the mine site. A channel on the shore of Little Cornwallis Island had been excavated, allowing the barge to be floated onto position at high tide. Other major structures, such as the accommodations building and the fuel tanks, were constructed on site. The accommodation building was designed to house up to 240 people. Now, the zinc and lead ore was between 60 meters to 300 meters below the surface, completely within the permafrost zone. And like I previously mentioned, being so far north, the climate was a big challenge. The site was located in the northern Arctic ecozone, an area that incorporates the coldest and driest landscapes in all of Canada. Staff at the mine would have to contend with a mean annual temperature of negative 17 degrees Celsius. On average, there were only 8 frost-free days a year. Precipitation levels at this high latitude would be extremely low, and snow would only begin melting in June, with ice breakup occurring during mid-July to early August. Wind speeds around the Polaris Mine would average around 20 kilometers an hour, and perhaps the biggest challenge was the permafrost, with it being over 600 meters deep. Now, in addition to the extreme climate and the total isolation as well as the logistical issues, there's also the problem of wildlife. You see, Little Cornwallis Island is home to both the Arctic wolf and the polar bear, both of which are potentially dangerous animals. The polar bear specifically pose a significant threat to humans. The mine commenced production in 1981 and employed over 250 people. One of the biggest criticisms of the mine was that only 20 employees were from northern Canada. During the life of the Polaris Mine, 21 million tons of both lead and zinc ore was produced, with a market value of over $1.5 billion. Now, as the ore started to dwindle, in 1998, the mine started reclamation activities. The goal here was to remove any hazardous materials, the buildings, as well as the associated equipment, and to limit any more environmental damage. You see, as part of the project, Polaris Mine started to discharge lead and zinc mine tailings into nearby Giro Lake at a rate of over 2,500 metric tons per day, which irreversibly altered the lake's chemistry. This was an expensive, multidisciplinary, and multi-year project. The entire cleanup took approximately 2 years to complete, and the mine was closed for good in 2002. Because the Polaris Mine was an underground mine and not an open pit mine, damage to the surface was minimal, and thus the northernmost mine in the world ceased operations and closed its doors for good. Today, the site sits completely empty. So if you like learning more about obscure locations in Canada, remember to subscribe to my channel. It only takes a second of your time, but it makes a big difference to me. It keeps me motivated to keep making cool and interesting content like this for you guys. And as always, if you like the video, comment below what you'd like to see next, share this video with your friends, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.